It's been fun this week to watch people walk into the building and to have them go, whoa. Because it's sort of like you walk into like what Buddy the Elf describes as he's making his way from the North Pole to New York City, right? Or like I said last week, it sort of feels like Whoville in here. But, and some of you kind of made mention of this, that it was confusing or you didn't really understand maybe until the end or till someone else told you. But there's a green line down like the center, not just of our auditorium and of our stage, but of our whole building. And this side is sort of like decorated up, and this side is a little bit more sparse, right? And so this is kind of what we're talking about, this idea that Christmas time and even our lives have good and have bad, have sometimes too much and at other times too little. And so with that in mind, think about this. Everyone likes to follow Jesus when it's fun. But fun is not really a primary concern when it comes to the Christian life. Christmas has a nicely put together exterior, but is quite often a season where struggles abound. The point is not to make everything perfect, but to recognize and welcome the hope of the world who himself arrived in dark and difficult circumstances. Your Christmas may look and feel like a big, beautiful, expensive Christmas tree. Your Christmas may look more like a Charlie Brown Christmas tree. And as much as we have strong preferences about which we'd prefer, right? It doesn't much matter. And so the invitation is, let's join together this month to discover the child who changes everything. And so as we were preparing for this series more than a year ago, it was one of those things where I told you last week, one of my working titles was A Tale of Two Trees, thinking about Charles Dickens' famous work, A Tale of Two Cities, right? That begins, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. And the truth is this, right? For all of us, our Christmas time and our lives, and sometimes it ebbs and flows a little bit, we have some of both going on in our lives, don't we? We have good things happening all the time, and most of the time we have some struggles as well, and sometimes those are overwhelming, and sometimes the good sort of kicks up, but we all experience both sides of this stage, both sides of the building. We experience the, whoa, that's cool. And we experience the, I don't really like this very much. And so, as we think about this today, I think we have this tendency where, we're like, okay, Rob, I know this month you're going to talk to us about having too much, and while every one of us would prefer to have too much over having not enough, there is a good balance to be found somewhere in the middle. I know you're going to talk about that, Rob, but I figured it out. Like how I do this, how I experience Christmas, it's just right? We do this kind of Goldilocks thing. I found this great slide, right? Goldilocks weather, not too hot, not too cold. It's just right. And I just want to tell you guys this, like if you're trying to figure out what the exact perfect way to celebrate Christmas is in regards to material things, there is no such thing as just right. Okay, so stop trying to figure out the exact perfect just right thing. I'm not going to name names. I've done this in the past. It's got me in trouble. But I know people who are like, I'm going to buy all my kids the same amount of Christmas stuff to the penny. And it's like, what? Like, stop worrying about that, right? It's not that big a deal. There's no such thing as just right. And for each of us, our temptation is to think how we do it is just right. And how everyone else does it maybe is a little bit off, and that's just not true. Because like we said last week, there is bad in what we perceive to be good, and there's also good in what we perceive to be bad. And so the goal for all of us isn't to figure out this balance. It's actually to see Jesus, and for us to allow Jesus to take sometimes our too much and sometimes our not enough, and for him to make it just right. And he can do that if we let him and if we look to him. So I'm going to show you these pictures all month too, right? We're thinking about the two trees of Christmas, and we have some cultural things that typify these. So my first picture is probably the most iconic tree ever, the Rockefeller Center Christmas tree in New York City. 82 feet tall, 50 feet wide. It weighs 14 tons. It has 50 million LEDs that if you string out to 5 miles of lights. Come on, this is the kind of Christmas and life we all think we want, right? Yeah. And then sometimes this is the other extreme. It's the Charlie Brown Christmas tree, right? That loses needles. I'm going to keep saying this because to me it's a Christmas miracle. If you've seen this little cartoon, right? Most of us have seen it dozens and dozens and dozens of times. Like every time they touch, move past, and any wind like hits that tree, it seems like hundreds of needles fall, but it doesn't have hundreds of needles. And then it still has needles. I know, it's like it's movie magic or something like that. I don't know. It can't stand up under its own weight. It certainly can't hold even a bulb. And sometimes, as I've watched that over the years, I thought to myself, like I would rather have nothing than have a tree that terrible. And so when we think about the Charlie Brown Christmas tree, we think, oh no, anything but that, right? This is the kind of Christmas and life we all think we're going to get stuck with, and we want to avoid this at all costs. But it's true, right? It's both for all of us. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. But today, we're going to focus on the good tree. All right? And so I'm actually going to take my table and move it over to the good side, and I'm going to just kind of hang out over here on the good side. Sorry for all of you who are over on the bad side. We're going to talk about your side next week, all right? And it's interesting, isn't it? Because the biblical Christmas has both sides too, doesn't it? Like think about like the good side, right? We have angel announcements and important visitors and expensive gifts and a star that actually people can follow that guides them to where they need to go. And yet, even with all of that awesome good tree stuff, we still have these famous words from Luke chapter 2, verses 4 through 7 that tell us, so Joseph also went up from the town of Nazareth in Galilee to Judea, to Bethlehem, to the town of David, because he belonged to the house and the line of David. He went there to be registered to Mary, who was pledged to be married to him and was expecting a child. While they were there, the time came for the baby to be born, and she gave birth to her firstborn, a son. She wrapped him in cloths and placed him in a manger because there was no guest room available for them. Right? So here's a pregnant woman making a trip, on foot or maybe on some smaller animal, feeling every little bump. She's not married, and yet she's pregnant. And they make this days-long trip, and at the end of it, the baby is coming. And there's no appropriate place for this, right? So not only is there disgrace because she and Joseph aren't married, and it's not even his, but the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords arrives and is placed in a manger, which is a trough that animals would eat their food out of. Jesus experienced both trees, didn't he? And if you and I could pick the tree that represents our Christmas or represents our lives, I'm pretty sure we would all pick the good tree, right? Like, if you have to deal with life, do you want to deal with life having way too much or way too little? It's kind of a dumb question, right? We would all rather have too much. Now, before I really get into this, let me say this. This is not an anti-materialism message, okay? This is not a, if you have too many presents under your tree, shame on you, feel bad, whatever. Because here's the truth. It's not wrong or bad to have or to give nice things, right? If you have the means to do this, enjoy Christmas however you want. That is totally fine. Nobody here is going to judge you for that. But also be sure to experience the freedom of laying down what you have in order to worship King Jesus. Right? Like this is one of our big ideas this month. So again, not an anti-materialism message. Can I tell you guys today some of my kind of Christmas stories? Is that all right? And one of the things that struck me over the years, if you think about like a Christmas and you think about like what maybe your most expensive gift that you received was and your favorite gift, have you ever noticed that a lot of times those are not the same gift? Like I have this memory from a Christmas, I was a little kid, I couldn't even tell you how old I was. I just remember I was sick that Christmas. I was sick a lot as a little kid, and I was sick that Christmas. I remember laying on the couch, and the only gift I remember from that Christmas was this little Star Wars blaster that was white and had a black knob on it that you could turn to make it go, do, do, do. Do, you know, like make the different laser sound. Anyone else, you remember this kind of stuff, right? Back when our toys were very primitive, right? And I just remember sick little, however many year old Rob laying on the couch with my little Star Wars blaster making the different noises. And I love that thing. It probably cost $10 or less. And I still remember it now many, many decades later, all right? I also remember the Christmas where my parents got me a bunch of things, but the two gifts I remember from that Christmas were they bought me a stereo, which actually they bought me a ghetto blaster. Come on. Some of you were like, what is that? It's a stereo. A little portable one. And they bought me a chemistry set. The stereo cost way more than probably triple, quadruple than the chemistry set. And probably over the life of both of them, maybe the stereo got more use, but you know what? For days and weeks, I didn't touch that stereo because I sat at the card table downstairs messing around with the chemistry set. It didn't matter that it was way less expensive. I loved doing all those experiments and making all those things happen. Listen, here's the truth. Like, when you think about what people in your life want, what your kids want, all that kind of stuff, by focusing on presents and their cost, all we really do is teach materialism, right? If somebody wants something, it really probably shouldn't matter if it costs a lot or it costs a little. Like, that's what's important, right? Like, this is meaningful and matters to you. So here's the thing. If you can afford to celebrate by getting everyone you know and love a Lexus, have fun. Like, totally do that, right? I just pray that I am one of those people that you know and love. I found this image. Check it out. This always like strikes me, right? Like you guys are like this commercial's on every year, right? The Lexus December to Remember sales event. And I don't know about you, but every time I see these commercials, I wonder how many people are really getting the Lexus at Christmas time? Anybody else have the same question in your head? Like, who's getting who Lexuses and how do we get on the list, right? Like, this is maybe, and I don't know if this is even from this year, I just found it. Like, who celebrates Christmas like this? Well, it may surprise you because we're going to see some stuff today. One of my best Christmas memories was when my sister and I, we were also little, and my parents told us that we were going to visit some relatives in southern Ontario. And so sometimes there's two ways to do that. It was to drive through the province of Ontario, or we could dip down into Michigan and cut through that way. So they said, hey, we're going to cut through Michigan. And you know how kids kind of, sometimes you can really Jedi mind trick them very easy? Because it was, I don't know, because it's like whatever, a 6-hour drive kind of through Michigan. And so it's like 2 days later, and it's in December, and it's getting warmer and warmer, and we notice we're like getting, more and more south, and I'm like, are we going to be there soon? Like, we didn't get it. It was sort of like this week I got into a vehicle with Liam and I had a present for him in my hand, and I just sort of, Jedi mind tricked him. He didn't even know. He didn't even see it. And so my parents were surprising my sister and I with a week in Florida for Christmas. We stayed in Clearwater, Florida. I still remember that hotel. I remember the swimming pool. I remember the pop machine because I would drink Sprites like they were going out of style. I remember that. And then I remember the day we went to Disney. And I still remember this was my first visit to Disney. And of all the cool stuff there, the thing that stuck out that I really remembered through my life, and I always go back to this every time we're there, is the It's a Small World ride, right? Like, what a cool ride. I remember that. It was so much fun, like greatest Christmas ever. I remember driving home because part of the way home, we hit a snowstorm. It was like a blizzard. It took forever to get through that. And then when we arrived home, the Christmas tree was literally loaded with presents. And my parents even said afterwards, the trip was so cool, we really didn't need to do anything else, but they really didn't think about that. So we had a ton of presents, and yet, with a ton of presents under the tree, I only remember one of them. It was a game called Crackpots for the Atari, my Atari. Remember Atari? Talk about low-tech video games, right? That's all I remember. Of all that, I remember the trip, I remember the experience, I remember the time with my family, but of all the gifts, all I remember was some dumb game that we played on our Atari. Now, something that we read as part of the Christmas story and around the time of the birth of Jesus, even though it happened quite likely months later, if not even as much as up to 2 years later, was way more extravagant than the way anybody celebrates Christmas, even in our culture. And here we see about this in Matthew chapter 2, verse 11. Here's what the text says. On coming to the house, see, that's how we know this was much, much later. They arrived at a house, not a stable or a manger or a place like that. They saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshiped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Now, just to give some context for this, gold was a typical gift that would be given to a newborn king. They would give a small chest of gold. It would weigh approximately 50 pounds of pure gold, which around this time, if we take the value today, would be about $750,000 worth of gold. Think about this, right? Jesus, who literally was born likely in a stable and was placed in a manger his first night on the planet, had some people show up, and one of the gifts was almost $1 million worth of gold. At this time, frankincense and myrrh were even more expensive than gold. These gifts combined were easily over $1 million and were likely more in the $3 to $4 million range. How crazy is that? $3 to $4 million. But these gifts had virtually nothing at all to do with materialism. They were symbolic. Gold represented kingship. This is what you would give to a king. Frankincense was about worship. Think about burning frankincense and this sweet-smelling aroma rising up to God. It was this picture of worship. And myrrh was a burial spice signifying death and mourning. Jesus, the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, was born to die. But their biggest meaning was really their focus. Forget about those things. It was really their focus. So before you and I go running off to celebrate Christmas with a ton of money, I want us to think today just about a couple things. Can we do that? Here's the first one. Really, really simple stuff, but important. Bow down and worship first. Did you notice that? When the Magi arrived at the house, what was the first thing they did? Ooh, 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 ooh. Want to see my gift? You're going to love this gift. No, had nothing to do with that, right? They got there, they bowed down, and they worshiped this baby. Their worship is the focus of this verse, not the extravagant gifts at all, right? The extravagant gifts weren't important. And even one of the gifts, its focus was worship as well. So before you get all into giving and getting of gifts, be sure you worship first. Does this make sense? And I just want to say this. We haven't said this out loud yet. This is only the second time in the 11 and a half years we've been here that Christmas falls on a Sunday. And so we have tons of opportunities to worship leading up to Christmas. And so on Friday, the day before Christmas Eve, we're going to do one of our Christmas Eve celebrations here at 6 o'clock on Friday evening. And then we're going to do two more identical to the Friday at 4 and 6 on Saturday. And then at 11 o'clock, we're going to do our unique candle light telling of the Christmas story. So pick one of those earlier ones, the one on Friday or one of the two on Saturday. Come to one of those. Some people do this, and I love this. They're like, you know what? I come like to one just with my family, and that's kind of a special, meaningful thing. And then if I invite others, I try to get them to come to a different one so I can focus on, just kind of creating a great experience for them. But whatever you do, come back for that 11 o'clock one if you're able to. It is magical. It's just awesome. And then we did this 10-ish years ago when Christmas fell on a Sunday. The next time, we're going to ask a lot of volunteers and a lot of people and a lot of leaders to serve, to make a difference for others those days. And so on Christmas, we're having no gatherings here, and we're saying hang out with your family and enjoy Christmas Day. So if you show up here on the 25th going, whoo-hoo-hoo, I'm excited to we won't be here. So just make note of that. So here's the idea, right? Worship first. Got it? Whatever you're going to do, gift-wise, other thing-wise, worship first. Okay, Rob, I got that. Then, especially Angie, she has it for sure. Then I can give the most expensive gifts I want, right? Sure, absolutely you can. But I want you to think about one more thing before you jump to that conclusion and embrace the best tree with the best gifts and all that stuff, all right? And this is going to be challenging. Think about one more thing first. Number 2, give your best gifts to Jesus. Now listen, Bud might not like this, but this is not like a year-end offering plea that I'm setting up here, right? Give your best gifts to Jesus. That's not what this is about. Do it however you want. I don't really care. But just sort of know these insane gifts were all focused on and given to Jesus, right? So this is important. At a time of year when our whole world is more open than maybe ever to the message of Jesus, a lot of times we as God's people are distracted and we're missing in action because we are so focused on the stuff that doesn't matter, and everyone else is kind of like, I might be really interested in Jesus, and we don't really help. And the problem is there's too much good stuff. And the good stuff keeps us from the best stuff. Listen, gifts are great. If you can do it, give gifts, receive gifts. That's great. Gifts are great, right? Everybody like gifts, right? Gifts are fine. Totally do that. But don't allow gifts to keep you and others from seeing and experiencing Jesus. You know what? Family, This is one of those things that we have all these traditions and these things and family. Family's the most important, Rob. Listen, family is unbelievably important. You will never hear me say anything different. But if it doesn't come close to Jesus, and listen, if your traditions are focused on family and not Jesus, as soon as family gets older and starts passing on, all you're going to do is be sad and lonely at Christmas because your family was your focus and now they're not here. Right? Like, do family stuff 100%, but make sure that Jesus is your focus. Give your best to him. What would it look like for you, your family, your kids, whoever, to give your best to Jesus this Christmas? What would that look like? I don't know exactly how you might do that, but what would that look like? Here's what I do know. This is kind of cool. As we think about our partnerships with our sister church and other churches in Ukraine, we gave, when the war first started, like 9-ish months ago, we as a church gave between $10,000 and $15,000 to help over there, which was amazing. Converge as a movement of churches have given over $1 million to date to help. And then just in these last number of weeks, actually just this last week, we sent $2,000 to our sister church, Hope Church. We sent $2,000 to Pastor Taras because he's been doing a lot of frontline work and ministering to people. And then we, in our avalanche offering buckets for that Christmas catalog, we actually this week sent right about $3,700 for just all those supplies to help people in need this Christmas. Isn't that cool? And why do we do that, right? We do it because of Jesus. We make him the focus of this kind of stuff. All right, so just one more thing, okay? One more thing that you may not think of that's good to mention as we think about all the stuff we want. We think about maybe having too much as opposed to too little. So it's found in 1 Timothy 6:10. Look at this verse. For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. Some people eager for money have wandered from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs. You know, as sometimes at this time of year in particular, as we look at other people, as we look at the people who have the best decorations, the fanciest tree, the most perfectly wrapped presents, right? It's easy, isn't it, as we compare what we have to what others have sometimes, to be a little bit jealous, right? To want what they have. But we don't usually see the stress that's sometimes involved in giving those kinds of things. We don't see the debt that goes into providing what most of the time is a very short-lived experience that doesn't last much at all. And as tough as things can be, you know, I'm sure you like me would say, well, Rob, I get that, but I would much rather navigate this world having too much than too little. If you let me pick every single time, I'm going to pick having too much, right? You like me? Right? We want too much way more than too little. But listen, it's not quite that easy. There's something we got to think about here. Because the text tells us, right, that the love of money isn't the root of all evil, as some people like to say. It is a root of all kinds of evil, right? Like if we're only ever eager for money and want more money and can never have enough money, that's not good. In fact, what the text says is that what that leads to is wandering away from God, from faith. And people who live this way, I love this term, have pierced themselves with all kinds of grief. Can I tell you guys, some of you already know about this, but about my most expensive Christmas present ever? All right. It was actually December 2018. And I'd been looking around for months, and finally at BMW of Cleveland, I found my dream car. Here's a picture of it. Check this out. It was a 2018 BMW 340i with the ZHP package. And the thing that sort of pushed this was I always wanted a 3 Series BMW with a manual transmission. And 2018 was the last year BMW included manual transmissions in 3 Series. So this was like my last chance to do this. And there were only 100 of these cars made with the ZHP package. And if you're wondering, well, what's the ZHP package? It basically just means that a car that's already stupidly fast, it made it faster. And there were only 75 with the manual transmission. So that's kind of what I wanted. And I remember finding this car, going in to look at it, and I offered the dealership $15,000 less because I knew what some other places were selling similar cars for, and they accepted my offer, and I had a bunch of equity in my Subaru, and so my car payment actually went down to buy my dream car. Now, I want to make a comment here about that because I remember telling a story similar to that in a group of pastors one time, and one of my pastor friends looked at me and said, "Why did you do that?" And I said, "Well, what do you mean? Why did you give all the reasons and explain why you buying that was okay to do?" Because nobody else other than a pastor ever does that, right? Why did you do that? And he said, if you want it, you can afford it, you've consulted with God about it, and your spouse doesn't want to kill you for making that purchase, then get it, right? And it was interesting because after he asked me that question, I had literally dozens and dozens of memories throughout my life of people going, "Oh, well, how much do we pay you?" Right? Or silly things like that, and it's like, well, gosh, when you went and bought this, and this, nobody said anything to you because I'm a pastor, I have to whatever, right? And so can I just say, like in 11 and a half years here at New Hope, you might say things like that behind my back, but I've never heard anyone say that to me. And I just want to say thank you for not being those kinds of people. I think that's important. So I got my dream car. I got it home. And I noticed out in sort of the natural light that there were, and this is like a black car issue anyway, but on this car, there were literally scratches everywhere. And so I reached out to the dealership. I drove back up to Cleveland. They buffed everything out, made it look as perfect as possible. It was, I don't know, a week later, it got kind of cold out, and I was trying to unlock the door to the gas thing, and it was frozen shut, and I couldn't get it to open. And then I think a week after that, I noticed almost an imperceptible dent in the roof that, again, the dealership fixed for me. I remember that next summer, Liam and I were going to visit Christopher up at Western Reserve Academy, and it was 90 degrees out, and the air conditioner couldn't keep up with the need when it was that hot, and so we were sweating in the car with the air at max, which drove me crazy. And then one of the cool things about luxury brands of cars is that anytime I needed a service, which was only once, I didn't own the car that long, but they would drive down from Cleveland, bring me an even nicer car, take my car up there, get the service, and then bring it back. I didn't have to drive it anywhere. I didn't have to wait. It was awesome. And I remember the first time this happened, and they always get these older retired guys to sort of do that, which is, I'd rather have that than a 20-year-old who likes to see how fast things can go, right? And so this guy is getting out of my dream car with his big gulp pop, and then knocks it into something and spills it throughout the interior of my car, which I was borderline having a heart attack. And then because of that, I literally walked around every inch of the car and noticed that when he stopped to get his big gulp, he rubbed a curb and put a rub in one of the rims on my car, which, again, needed to be fixed. Now, uh, I love this biblical term because in the 10 months I owned this car, I was constantly pierced with many griefs. Right? Like, sometimes if you just have something that's functional, oh, it's just a lot less to worry about, right? And again, I only owned it for 10 months because we didn't know this when I bought the car, but we decided to buy a house on 20 acres and fix it up, and I couldn't stand driving my low-profile sports car up my rutted 700-foot gravel driveway over and over again. That would have killed my soul. So we got rid of that. We sold it. Listen, even with all that, I'm not saying that I wouldn't want another one of those someday, but what I am saying is this. Getting all we want can add grief and stress to our life. Okay? If I get it, like I would rather have everything I want than not, and you would too. But getting all we want can and does add grief to our life and stress to our life. So, Rob, what should I do instead then? I have no idea. You figure that out for you. But you know what? It could be as simple as with your family this year, pausing and reading the Christmas story. One of the things our family does is every year we typically pick some book or story and we read it throughout the Advent season. It's just a way to help us focus. It could be bring your kids to Vacation Bible School or your grandkids that we're doing these next few days, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. It's go time, right? And I had people the last 2 days say to me, someone last night at the theater came to me and said, can I still sign up my grandkids? Absolutely. You can still sign kids up. You can still help. It's going to be an awesome week here at New Hope. Telling kids, regardless whether their Christmas looks like this or if it looks like this, they can experience the greatest adventure ever by knowing and living for Jesus. What a great thing. You know what? This Christmas, before you get into whatever your Christmas looks like, bring your family, bring your kids to worship first. Do whatever you can. Be creative to help your kids to see that even more than presents and family, this season is all about Jesus. So I love this series. I love this sort of image, right, of two trees. We got the beautiful tree. We got the Charlie Brown Christmas tree. Listen, Christmas is not all about your tree. Whether you have one that looks like Rockefeller Center or one that looks like Charlie Brown, or for you, maybe you don't even have a tree at all. Listen, it's about Jesus and making him the focus in the midst of everything else, of all the busyness you're gonna experience. It's about focusing on Jesus. And if you let Jesus bring the meaning, it will be better. It will be the best. If you let stuff bring meaning, if you let just family bring meaning, it will lack. But if you let Jesus bring the meaning, it will be better and the best. The only two trees, church, that matter are the ones used to build the manger and the one to build the cross. So instead of worrying about your tree, I want to end where we ended last week. This Advent, please don't just sing about the kingdom of God. See yourself as an agent of that kingdom sent to bring healing, restoration, and repair to a broken world in the name of Jesus and by the power of the Holy Spirit. Amen. So Rob, that sounds cool, but how do we do that? I don't know. Again, you do that for you. For us, I know as a family, we have resisted this temptation. Sometimes, certain years, we've said to our kids, we're just getting you one present this year. Some years, what we've done is we said, you know what, the main thing we're going to do is we're just going to spend time together. One of the things we try to do every year is find creative ways to bless people. Last year, we with another family drove around and to a bunch of people who had just recently lost a spouse, we sang Christmas carols. We want to be on God's mission way more than we want to sit at home and open presents. Christmas is not something that anyone can purchase. It has nothing to do with your house looking like this, or your house looking like this, or your house looking like something altogether different. So I just want to ask a couple questions. Just, if you could just assume a posture of reflection, just 2 questions for you today. The first is this: will Christ be acknowledged in your life this Christmas? Will you even acknowledge Him? Will the thing that happened in your mind and in your heart, if you're being honest, involve Jesus much at all? Will you acknowledge Christ in your life this Christmas? If that's all it is, sometimes maybe others wouldn't even see that or know that. But are you at least going to take that step? Or are you just going to get overrun with all of the stuff and the busyness? And the second question is this: way more than just being acknowledged, will Christ be magnified in your life this Christmas? Or are you just going to lift up materialism and stuff and a great tree and lots of presents and maybe cool family things? Or is the focus of this Christmas going to be that you will magnify Jesus so that He can literally transform you and your family and everyone? Jesus, I just want to ask that my words today would add 0 stress. My goal, my intent is not for anyone to feel bad about having a nice tree or having too many gifts. There's nothing wrong with that stuff. God, I don't want anyone to feel like, oh man, if I don't get this balance right, I'm gonna mess up. This is not about stress. This is about liberation and freedom. God, you want to set us free. And when we stop focusing on all the silly stuff that we tend to focus on, even as your people at this time of year, and we focus on Jesus, He sets us free. And so, Lord, today I pray that our goal would be to magnify the name of Jesus. And as we focus on that goal for these coming weeks, God, I pray that you would set us free in ways we've never experienced before. We ask these things together in Jesus' name. Amen.